Welcome back to Mia Horror Stories. Tonight's tale, I keep hearing my mom's voice, but she died last year, is best experienced in the dark, which is why the screen will stay black. No distractions, no flashing images, just you, your imagination, and the story. So sit back, relax, and listen all the way to the end, if you dare. The fridge clicked off with a soft thud, then hummed again a few seconds later. I was alone in the kitchen, standing over the counter chopping carrots for dinner, and the sound felt wrong, like it was happening late, a second too late. I paused, knife in midair, fingers curled around the handle. The kitchen smelled faintly of garlic from the sauce I'd started, mingled with the mustiness from the old wooden cabinets. I reached out to press the fridge door, as if checking it was still cold inside. It was. The light was on, nothing out of place, but the rhythm, the timing had slipped. It was off. "Jake, you good in there?" My sister's voice floated from the living room, soft but clear through the thin walls. "Yeah, just give me a sec." I set the knife down, wiped my hands on a towel, and tried to shake off the unease. It wasn't the fridge. It was me. Probably. Jake, that's me, by the way. 34, living in a small, slightly run-down apartment in Cleveland. I work as a graphic designer from home. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills. My sister, Mara, 29, lives with me. She's a nurse, always in scrubs or talking about work like she's trying to ward off something she doesn't want me to see. We lost Mom last year, sudden heart attack. That's the only real crack in this place. The apartment wasn't much, peeling wallpaper, scuffed hardwood floors, a balcony overlooking a crowded street that smelled like car exhaust and old rain. But it was home, or as close to home as I'd had since Mom died. I peeled the carrot and kept listening to the fridge. Then, faintly, the front door clicked open. Mara stepped in, shrugging off her coat, her hair still damp from the rain outside. "You forgot your umbrella again," I said, watching her shake water from her sleeves. She smiled tiredly. Yeah, I know." Her voice had that edge, part exhaustion, part something else. She dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her boots, then leaned against the wall. "I'm running late tomorrow," she said, rubbing her temples. "Double shift. I might crash here if that's okay." "Sure," I nodded, but the words felt empty. It wasn't just the fridge or the door that was off. There was something else, something I couldn't put my finger on. Mara glanced at the kitchen, then said quietly, "You've been weird all day. You all right?" I shrugged, just tired, I guess. The apartment filled with the sound of rain tapping against the windows, the low rumble of distant traffic. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. I started chopping again. Then I heard it. "Jake, dinner's ready." The voice was soft, familiar, my mom's voice, clear as day. I froze. Myra looked up. "What? Did you just call me?" I asked, eyes scanning the room. "No, I didn't say anything." She frowned, stepping closer. I swallowed hard. That was Mom. Mara blinked. "Jake, come on." I shook my head. "No, I swear, it was her." "Maybe the TV." She pointed toward the living room. No, the TV was off. My heart picked up pace. The sound was too real, too precise. Mom's voice calling from the hallway, warm and familiar, but impossible. She died last year. Mara's eyes softened. You're stressed. It's been a tough week. Maybe, I said, trying to convince myself more than her. But the unease clung to me, cold and unwelcome. Look, she said, we can order pizza. Take a break. I nodded, but something had shifted. That voice, it wasn't in my head. Or was it? I grabbed my phone. The screen lit up in the dim kitchen light. No notifications. A message popped up out of nowhere. Dinner's ready, come eat. I blinked. The text was from Mom's old number. The message from Mom's number blinked on the screen again. Louder this time. The notification ding cutting through the kitchen's quiet hum. I grabbed my phone and stared at it. No new text. Just the same old message. Dinner's ready. Come eat. Jake, what the hell? Mara's voice was sharp, pulling me from the loop of disbelief. She'd finished changing out of her scrubs, now leaning against the kitchen table, arms crossed, eyes flickering between my face and the phone in my hand. I don't know. I didn't send it. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. I think someone's messing with me. Mara scoffed, but it was low and nervous. You don't think maybe it's a prank? Or someone hacked your phone? Maybe. I slid the phone across to her. Look at the number. It's Mom's old number. It shouldn't even be active anymore. She glanced at it, brow furrowing. Maybe it got reassigned. Happens all the time. I shook my head. I checked. It's still linked to her old voicemail. There was a long pause. The rain hammered the window with sudden force, making the dim room feel smaller. Okay, Mara said finally, voice quieter now. Maybe someone's using it to freak you out. But who? And why? I looked away, the edge of panic rising behind my ribs. The past year hadn't been kind. Losing Mom was hard enough, but I'd spent months unraveling, doubting my own memories, questioning if I was seeing things or hearing things that weren't there. This, though, this was different, concrete, real. I ran a hand through my hair, and I swear I heard her voice calling me tonight. Not a recording, not on TV. It was right here. Jake, you need to calm down. Maybe you're just tired. You've been cooped up all day. Stress does weird things. Mara's tone was soft, but I could hear the frustration under it. She worried about me. I knew it. I'm not crazy. I said it with more force than I meant. She met my gaze. No, you're not, but something going on. Let's figure it out. We moved into the living room, rain streaking the window pane. Mara pulled out her laptop, and I sat on the couch, still gripping my phone. First thing, she said, typing quickly. Let's see if the number is actually active. I'm gonna check the carrier database. Good. I watched the rain slide down the glass, blurry and cold. Mara frowned after a moment. Yeah, the number's assigned to someone now. Some guy named Matt Lawson in Columbus. Weird. Columbus was 2 hours away. Maybe he's the prankster. I tried to laugh, but it was hollow. Maybe I'll look him up. We fell into tense silence, the storm outside rising. The lights flickered once, twice, before steadying again. Then the power cut out. The room went black, except for the streetlight glow spilling through the curtains. Our phones lit up automatically, but no Wi-Fi, No signal. Shit, Mara said, blinking at her laptop screen, now dead. I stood, moving to the window. The street was dark, except for a few cars parked under dim lamps. The rain slowed. I don't like this, I said. Mara nodded, pulling her phone out again, swiping uselessly. No service. The power outage wasn't supposed to be happening. The apartment complex had backup generators for emergencies, but nothing kicked in. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Okay, first, let's check the breaker. Mara grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and we headed toward the fuse box in the hallway. The flashlight beam hit the metal panel. I flipped it open. All the switches were up. Nothing tripped. Nothing here, I said. Maybe the whole block. Mara looked out the window again. No, the buildings across the street still have lights on. A sudden banging came from the front door. We both jumped. Mara moved toward the door, flashlight shaking slightly in her hand. Hello, she called out. No answer. The knocking stopped. We exchanged looks. Maybe someone's just messing around, I said. Or someone trying to get in. I swallowed. The lock on the door was old, easy to pick or break. Our landlord was supposed to fix it weeks ago, but never did. I glanced around. No spare keys, no chains, no security system. Let's not open it, I said. Just call the landlord. No signal. Mara's face tightened. We're trapped in the dark with no power, no phone service, and someone's knocking. My throat tightened. The rational part of me tried to push down the dread. We should call the police, I said. No signal. We can go downstairs. Use a neighbor's phone. The stairs were on the far side of the building, down 2 flights. Yeah, if the power's out, the elevator won't work. It's a long way, and it's raining. I'll go, Mara said, already moving toward the door. No, wait, you're working a double tomorrow. You need rest. She stopped. So what? You want to stay here alone? I'm not alone. I nodded toward the door. If that's someone outside. The knocking returned, harder this time. Deliberate. Mara took a deep breath. Fine, you stay. I'll be back soon. I wanted to protest, but she was already slipping on her jacket. As the door closed behind her, the temperature in the apartment seemed to drop. I locked the door, double-checked it, then sat down with my back against it. The flashlight flickered once, then died. The phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A new message. Come to the door. It's me. The flashlight was dead, and the hallway was dark, except for the faint glow from the streetlights bleeding through the thin curtains. I gripped the door handle, staring at the spot where the knocks had come from. The message burned in my mind. Come to the door. It's me. Whoever me was, it was Mara. Not yet. I forced myself to breathe evenly. The rain had slowed to a drizzle outside. The building was quiet, save for the distant hum of cars on the wet streets and the occasional scrape of wind against the windows. I grabbed the kitchen knife, a pathetic weapon, but better than nothing, and edged toward the door. Before I reached it, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Please, Jake. The words made my skin crawl. I put the phone on speaker on the floor, leaned in close. No new voice, no sound, just the faint crackle of static. I took a deep breath and unlocked the door a fraction. "Who's there?" I called. No answer. The hallway outside was empty, wet from rain. The stairwell was dark, except for emergency lights far down the hall. I stepped out slowly, knife in hand, heart hammering in my chest. "Hello," I said again. No reply. I peered down the hall to the stairs. Footsteps echoed faintly below. I took 2 steps forward, then froze. A shadow darted across the landing above, then disappeared into a neighbor's open apartment door. I swallowed and approached the door. It was an elderly man, Mr. Donovan. He lived alone on the 3rd floor. I'd seen him before, but never talked much. He looked up, startled. "Jake, is everything all right?" I forced a shaky smile. "Yeah, I thought I heard something at my door. Power outright. Strange weather." "Yeah." He shuffled out, holding a flashlight that flickered weakly. "Be careful. Someone been messing with the locks lately." I nodded, relief washing over me. Maybe it was just the building settling, some prankster going floor to floor. I turned back inside, locking the door more securely this time. I sat back against the door, wiping sweat from my brow. The texts kept coming. "Why won't you answer?" "I'm here." My mind raced. If someone was in the building, moving around in the dark, that was bad. But if the texts were coming from outside, how? I checked the windows. All locked, rain dripping down the panes. I tried the landline phone. Dead. The Wi-Fi router blinked. No internet. No signal on my phone. Then, in the dim light, I noticed something odd on the floor near the balcony door. A small, wet footprint. I crouched to examine it. Not mine, not Mara's. "Fuck," I whispered. I moved slowly to the balcony door, tested the lock. It was secure, but the frame looked recently tampered with. Scratches on the wood. Panic bubbled up. My phone buzzed again. "Let me in." I flinched. I shoved the knife into my waistband and went to the bedroom. I grabbed the baseball bat Mara kept by the door. The apartment felt like a trap. Now no power. No way out without going through the darkness. And whoever was out there. I paced, trying to steady my nerves. Minutes dragged. Then a sudden loud crash came from the balcony. I spun toward the noise, heart pounding. Shit. I switched on my phone's flashlight and shone it toward the balcony door. A branch had fallen from the tree outside, shattering a small planter. No intruder. I sank to the floor, relief mixing with exhaustion. I couldn't keep this up. Mara was still out there. I debated going after her, but my phone still had no service. Then I remembered the neighbor, Mr. Donovan. I grabbed my jacket and flashlight. Miraculously, the small battery was still working and stepped out into the hallway. The air was damp and cold. I knocked on his door. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Still silence. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open cautiously. Inside, the apartment was dark and empty, but the smell hit me immediately. Stale smoke, old wood, something burnt. Then, in the corner of the room, a chair was overturned. No sign of Mr. Donovan. I stepped back, unease growing. My phone buzzed again. You can't leave. I bolted back down the hallway. When I reached the stairs, I hesitated. I heard voices, 2 people arguing loudly below. I crept toward the stairwell opening, peered down. 2 men soaked from rain, faces grim. One held a crowbar. The other was shouting. It sounded like a landlord dispute, but their anger felt too raw. I ducked back inside, heart racing. I locked the door again, trying to steady my breath. The power was still out, and Mara hadn't returned. My phone buzzed again. Open up. I stared at the screen. The realization hit me hard. Whatever was going on, it wasn't random. Someone was watching. Someone was inside the building, and they knew I was alone. The hallway felt impossibly dark as I crept toward the door, baseball bat tight in my grip. The texts kept coming, a relentless drip of messages from Mom's number. Open up. It's me. Please. But I knew it wasn't her. My chest tightened with a mixture of fear and something sharper, dread, mixed with a stubborn thread of anger. Whoever was out there, whoever was watching, was using Mom's voice like a weapon, like a trap. I glanced at the broken planter on the balcony, the wet footprints still fresh on the floor near the door. Whoever had been here had been close enough to touch me. The 2 men arguing downstairs had gone silent. The building was unnervingly still, the hum of rain the only sound now. I tried the door again, locked tight. The lock hadn't been fixed, I knew that. My phone buzzed. One last message. Let me in, Jake. I swallowed and edged the door open a fraction. A low, rough voice whispered, Jake, let me in. The voice was Mom's, but something darker, gravelly, urgent. I slammed the door. Who is it? I shouted. No answer, just silence. Then a series of knocks, hard and quick. I backed away, heart hammering. The adrenaline made my hands shake. Suddenly, the door shuddered. Someone was trying to force it open. I grabbed the bat, planting my feet ready. The doorknob rattled violently. I braced myself. Then a loud crash. The door gave way. A figure lunged inside. I swung. The bat connected with a sickening thud. The man grunted, stumbling back. He was tall, soaked from the rain, eyes wild. Stay back, I barked. He laughed, a harsh, broken sound. I'm not here to hurt you, he said, voice raw. We need to get out. Who are you? I demanded. Matt Lawson, the guy with your mom's old number. Shock hit me like a punch. Why are you here? He swallowed, eyes darting to the window. It's my building too. Landlord's gone, left us all in the dark. Things are falling apart. I shook my head, heart racing. You scared me. He nodded, rubbing a bloody lip. Sorry. Suddenly, a scream echoed from the stairwell. Mara. My head snapped toward the sound. I raced toward the door. Matt followed. We burst into the hallway. Mara was sprawled on the floor, clutching her ankle, face pale. 2 men from earlier loomed over her, one holding a crowbar. We're taking what's ours, one said, voice cold. Matt and I exchanged a glance. I raised the bat. The men advanced. A blur of movement. The first man swung the crowbar. I ducked, but the handle caught my arm, leaving a burning bruise. Matt tackled the second man. I swung again, catching the first in the ribs. The fight was brutal and fast. Mara screamed again, trying to crawl away. The second man broke free, grabbing Mara's jacket. I slammed the bat down on his hand. He dropped her, snarling. Matt grabbed Mara's arm, helping her up. The men retreated, shouting threats. We slammed the door shut, breathing heavy. Mara winced, limping. "I'm okay," she said, face pale but fierce. I looked at Matt, then at Mara. "We need to get out. Call the police." "No signal," Mara said through gritted teeth. Matt pulled out a phone, weak signal. "I know a neighbor with a working phone," he said. I nodded. We moved quickly through the dark halls. The storm had let up, but the tension hung thick. At the neighbor's door, Matt knocked firmly. A woman answered, eyes wide. Matt explained quickly. She handed over her phone. We called 911. Sirens wailed in the distance. Relief washed over me, but it was fragile. Back in the apartment, the damage was clear. Mara's ankle swollen and bruised. The door splintered. Matt's lip bleeding. And me adrenaline crashing, muscles sore. I sat heavily, the weight of everything pressing down. Mara looked at me, voice trembling. "We can't stay here." "No," I agreed. And in that moment, I knew the safety I'd taken for granted was gone. The apartment, the texts, the power outage, all pieces of a fracture I wasn't ready to face. But we survived. For now, the ambulance sirens faded into the background, swallowed by the steady rain that had started again outside. The paramedics had taken Mara to the hospital, her ankle wrapped in a makeshift splint, her face pale but steady now. I sat in the quiet of our battered apartment, the flickering emergency light above casting shadows across the cracked walls. Matt had left shortly after the police arrived, giving his statement about the landlord's neglect and the men who had been causing trouble in the building. The officers promised to patrol more regularly, but I knew better. Nothing really changed overnight in places like this. The door still bore the scars of the forced entry, splintered wood, jagged cracks where the lock had finally given way. I stared at it, feeling the weight of every moment that had passed, the fear, the confusion, the betrayal. Mom's voice had been used against me, a ghost of the past twisted into something dangerous. I wanted to believe it was over, but the cold knot in my stomach said otherwise. The hospital called a few hours ago. Mara's injury was a severe sprain, no fracture, but the recovery would take weeks. She sounded tired but determined when I spoke to her. "We'll get through this," she said. I wanted to believe her. I spent the night on the couch, unable to sleep. The texts had stopped, but my phone felt like a tether to something unseen. I stared at the screen, half expecting another message from Mom's old number, but there was nothing. Outside, the city buzzed quietly, indifferent to the small dramas unfolding in its shadowed corners. Life moved on. I thought about calling the landlord again, pressing for answers, but what good would it do? People disappeared in this city, swallowed by paperwork and neglect. Matt had said the landlord had abandoned the building months ago. No heat, no maintenance, no care. The police asked, if I wanted to press charges against the men who attacked us. But without clear identification or witnesses, it felt like a hollow threat. Mara didn't want to get involved beyond what was necessary. The exhaustion in her voice was real. I realized then how fragile our little world was, how easily it could unravel. The next day, I went to the balcony, looking out at the rain-soaked street below. The planter was gone, replaced by a muddy patch where the branch had smashed it. A neighbor walked by, giving me a wary nod. We had no real connection, but something unspoken passed between us, a shared acknowledgement of the building's quiet decay. I checked my phone one last time. A message from Mom's old number. Just one word. Sorry. I stared at it, heart pounding. Who sent it? Why now? I deleted the message and put the phone down because some ghosts, I realized, didn't want to be chased. They just wanted to be left alone. That's tonight's story. If it gives you chills, make sure to like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next. And if you're still brave enough, there are more dark tailies waiting for you right here on the channel. Go watch another, if you dare. Hey everyone, this is Mia Horror Stories, and the title of today's horror story is I rented a room with no mirrors. Now I know why. For your comfort, the screen will stay black throughout the video, so you can relax without strain and just focus on the story. Make sure you stick around until the end. Sometimes the last few moments are the ones that stay with you the longest. The first thing I noticed wasn't the missing mirrors. It was the outlet. I was kneeling on the worn hardwood in sock feet, trying to plug in my phone charger, and the wall plate behind the bedside table had been painted over so many times, the screw heads were buried. The outlet itself sat a few degrees crooked, like it had been installed in a hurry or knocked loose, and then ignored. When I pushed the charger in, the prongs met resistance that felt wrong spongy. Almost. Then it gave with a soft, wet click that made my stomach tighten. I paused with my hand, still on the plug. In the hallway outside the room, someone's footsteps stopped. A weight shift. A throat cleared quietly. The building was old enough that sound traveled through it the way smoke travels under a door. Everything good in there? A man's voice called. Yeah, I said automatically, because that's what you say. My throat felt dry. Just old outlet. Gotta wiggle it, he said, like it was a joke. Like the rest of the place. I did wiggle it, just a fraction, and the phone began to charge. The screen lit my hand and the floorboards and the edge of the bedspread. The click could have been paint cracking, could have been the prongs scraping oxidation, could have been nothing at all, but the sound stayed with me, the way a certain tone of alarm will, even after you've turned the stove off and you know there's no fire. I stood and took a breath through my nose. The room smelled like heated dust and lemon cleaner, and something faintly sweet that didn't belong, maybe someone's shampoo in the pipes, or a candle burned months ago. The radiator under the window ticked softly, metal adjusting to late fall cold. Outside, a bus sighed at the corner and pulled away, tires whispering over wet asphalt. I set my backpack on the bed and let my shoulders drop for the first time all day. My name is Evan Hale, And this was supposed to be a simple, practical move. 6 weeks in a new city, cheap sublet, walkable commute. Keep my head down until my contract ended, and I could decide what came next. The kind of in-between life you can justify to yourself because it's temporary. I told myself temporary meant safe. That was the flaw I kept trying to sand down. This belief that if something has an end date, it can't really touch you. Like you can rent a life the way you rent a room and return it undamaged. I had other reasons for picking this place too. My bank app had been glaring at me for months, and I was tired of hearing my own phone ring with unknown numbers. Mostly, though, I needed somewhere anonymous. Somewhere I wouldn't be recognized, or worse, recognized and asked questions. Because I had a private fear I didn't say out loud. That I was the kind of person who missed things right in front of him. Not in the metaphorical way people use when they're being poetic. In the literal, humiliating way. 2 years earlier, I'd walked into a glass door at work so hard it left a perfect oval bruise on my forehead and a hairline crack in the pane. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, until I drove home and sat in my car with the engine off and realized my hands were shaking. Since then, I'd gotten good at pretending I wasn't the kind of person who walked into obvious barriers. I crossed the small room to open the curtains. The window stuck, and when it finally moved, it made a thin squeal that scraped at my teeth. The view was a narrow slice of street and the brick wall of the building across. A laundromat sign buzzed in the distance, blue and tired. In the glass of the window, I caught the dim outline of myself. Not a clear reflection, more like a shadow wearing my clothes. For a second, I lifted a hand and watched the shape lift a hand too, delayed by half a heartbeat because of the uneven light. Then the window shifted in its frame, and the outline vanished, swallowed by the night outside. I turned around, and that's when I saw the absence. No mirror above the dresser. No mirror on the closet door. No mirror on the wall over the little desk. The bathroom door stood open, just enough to show white tile and a shower curtain with tiny gray anchors. And where there should have been a mirror over the sink, there was nothing. Just a plain patch of wall, painted the same off-white as the rest, with a slightly different sheen like it had been redone. At first, my brain did that thing where it tries to make the missing object appear by force. Like if you stare long enough, it will remember itself into existence. I stepped into the bathroom and leaned over the sink. There was a medicine cabinet, but the front was a solid panel of wood, not mirrored. Hinges on the left. A tiny gap at the top where the door didn't quite meet the frame. Someone had installed it like that on purpose, and not recently. The wood was scuffed, corners softened by years of hands. I ran water. The tap shuddered and then steadied into a thin stream. It sounded too loud in the small space. I splashed my face, mostly to reset my body, and looked up again without thinking. Blank wall. For a moment, it made me feel stupidly off balance, like reaching for a stair that isn't there. I heard the hallway again, footsteps, closer this time. A knock, light but firm, on my bedroom door. Evan, the same voice said, "You there?" "I'm here," I called. I grabbed a towel from the rack. It was thin and rough, the kind that feels like it's been washed 1,000 times. "Come in." The door pushed open, and a man leaned in, careful, like he expected to hit something. He was holding a ring of keys and a clipboard that looked older than it needed to. Martin Klein, 58. Male appeared in the doorway with a practiced landlord posture. Shoulders slightly forward, smile small and controlled, eyes scanning the room even while he spoke. He wore jeans and a navy sweater with a frayed cuff, and his hair was gray at the temples like he once had darker hair and decided not to fight the rest of it. His shoes squeaked faintly on the floorboards as he took 2 steps inside. "Sorry to bug you," he said. "Just wanted to make sure the heat's working. Sometimes it takes a second in this building." "It's ticking," I said, nodding at the radiator. "Seems fine." He followed my gaze and then smiled like the radiator had made a joke. "Yeah, she talks." He flicked his eyes toward the bathroom, then back to me. I couldn't tell if it was habit or something else. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice like we were in a library. "I know you got in late. I'll keep it quick. Wi-Fi password on the fridge. If you need anything, text me. Don't call after 10 unless it's a real emergency." "Okay," I said. I was still thinking about the outlet click, the crooked wall plate, the blank space where a mirror should be. Martin shifted his weight. The keys clinked. He looked at me, then away, like he was deciding whether to say something and losing an argument with himself. "You're sure you read the listing all the way?" he asked. I blinked. "Yeah, furnished room, month to month, no pets, no smoking." He nodded slowly, but his expression didn't match the words. His eyes went again, quick, toward the bathroom. "Right." My phone buzzed on the bed. A single sharp vibration that made me jump more than it should have. I glanced down. A notification from my banking app reminding me about a payment due. The screen's brightness cut across the room. Martin saw the glow and smiled again, as if relieved to have a normal thing to point at. "You need a mirror. There's one in the hallway," he said, and then added immediately, like correcting himself. Well, there was. The big one. But the hallway light been weird, so anyway. You'll figure it out. I stared at him. Is there a reason there aren't any mirrors in here? His face did something small. Not fear, not guilt, more like irritation that had been rehearsed. People break 'em, he said. Old building, they fall. Glass is a headache. I got tired of replacing them. Mirrors fall off walls, I asked, trying to keep it casual, like I wasn't suddenly aware of how I couldn't see myself in this space unless I used my phone camera or the dark window at night. Everything falls off walls in this place, he said, and laughed softly. Then he sighed, the laugh dropping away. Look, it's just simpler. If that's a deal breaker, you can back out. I haven't cashed your deposit yet. There it was. Not quite an invitation. Not quite a warning. Just a door cracked open. I thought of my suitcase in the rideshare trunk, the driver's impatient messages, the price of hotels this time of year, the way my contract clock was already ticking. I thought of how tired I was of moving, of feeling like every decision had a trapdoor. and I thought of the outlet's wet click and how I couldn't explain why it bothered me so much. "I don't need a mirror," I said, and heard myself say it too quickly. "It's fine. I'm here to work." Martin's shoulders eased a fraction, like he'd been holding them up for a reason. "Good," he said. "Good. Then we're good." He stepped backward toward the door and paused with his hand on the knob. "One more thing," he said, and his voice went casual again, almost light. "If anyone knocks asking about the previous renter, don't get pulled into it. Just don't." "Why would?" I started, but he was already moving, closing the door gently. Not a slam, not dramatic, just a careful click as if sound itself mattered. I stood there with the radiator ticking, and the bus noises fatting, and my phone screen dimming back to black. In the bathroom, the blank wall waited. In my room, the window reflected nothing I could trust. And in the hallway outside, Martin's footsteps retreated slowly, pausing once, as if he'd stopped and listened before continuing down the corridor. I picked up my phone and opened the camera, holding it up to my face. The little digital version of me stared back, grainy in the low light, and I hated how relieved I felt to see it. Then, from somewhere deeper in the building, I heard another sound. A door opening, a muffled voice, and then 3 quick knocks, wood on wood, followed by silence. Not at my door. Not yet. I stood with my phone in my hand and had to decide whether to step into the hallway and see who was there, or stay inside and pretend I hadn't heard anything at all. The knocking came back at 9:47 p.m. Not the polite, neighborly kind. 3 sharp taps, a pause, then 2 more, faster. It echoed down the hallway like someone testing the sound. I stood inside my room with the lights off, phone in my hand, camera app still open from earlier. The little red dot glowed at the top of the screen. Recording, I realized, and stopped it without meaning to. The silence after felt heavier, like I'd taken my hand off a railing. Another knock, closer now. "Hello," a woman's voice said, not loud, controlled, the kind of voice that expects to be heard. I cracked my door and leaned out. The hallway light flickered the way Martin had mentioned, bright and bright, buzzing faintly. At the far end, near the stairs, a woman stood with a canvas tote over her shoulder. She wore a rain jacket and jeans and had the posture of someone who spends a lot of time waiting for answers. She saw me and raised a hand. "Sorry to bother you. Do you live here?" "Temporarily," I said, immediately annoyed at myself for the word choice. She nodded. "I'm looking for someone who used to." I thought of Martin's warning. The way he'd added "don't like it" was a favor. I could have closed the door. I should have. Instead, I stepped into the hallway. "I just moved in," I said, "tonight." "Then you won't know," she said, not unkindly. "But you might have seen something." She introduced herself as Lena Moritz, 34, female, and spoke with careful precision, like every sentence was something she'd practiced. She worked for a property management company downtown, she said. Not this one. She was trying to locate a former tenant, a man named Daniel Price, who'd stopped responding to emails and hadn't shown up for a required inspection at his new place. "Why here?" I asked. Because his forwarding address bounced, she said. And because his last utility usage spike was from this building. I glanced back at my door, at the dark rectangle of my room beyond it. You should talk to the landlord. I did, she said. He said Daniel moved out months ago. No issues, no complaints. The way she said it made it clear she didn't believe him. The hallway light dimmed again, stayed dim. Somewhere below us, a toilet flushed, pipes clanking in a familiar, bodily way. The building felt awake, listening. Look, I said, lowering my voice without thinking. He told me not to get involved. She studied my face, like she was mapping it. And you're getting involved anyway. I didn't answer, which felt like an answer. My phone buzzed then, an alert I'd set weeks ago and forgotten. Payment due in 15 minutes. The same one from earlier. Time had slipped in a way I hated, the way it always did when I wasn't paying attention. I can't stay long, I said. What do you need? She hesitated, then took a folded paper from her tote. This building has an unresolved maintenance ticket, she said, filed under Daniel's name. It's about a bathroom cabinet. My stomach tightened. The medicine cabinet. Yes, she said. He reported it wouldn't close properly. Said the hinge was bent. Said there was a gap. I thought of the wood-fronted cabinet, the tiny space at the top where it didn't meet the frame. How I'd noticed it, because it didn't reflect anything back at me. What does that have to do with him missing? I asked. It doesn't, she said, until it does. He requested an emergency inspection. Then he canceled it. Then he stopped answering. The hallway light brightened suddenly, humming louder. And for a second, the far end of the corridor flared white. I squinted. That's not my job, I said. I'm just renting a room. I know, she said. But you're the only person in that room now. And I have 15 minutes before my parking runs out, and I get a ticket I can't expense. Time-sensitive, concrete, mundane. The kind of pressure that nudges you into stupid decisions. She gestured toward my door. Can I see the cabinet? I should have said no. I should have remembered every other time I'd convinced myself that looking couldn't hurt. Instead, I unlocked the door and let her in. Inside, the room felt smaller with another person in it. The radiator ticked. The outlet behind the bed made a faint buzzing noise I hadn't noticed before, like an insect trapped behind glass. Lena moved with professional care, not touching anything she didn't need to. She paused in the bathroom doorway, taking in the blank wall, the wooden cabinet. No mirror, she said. Is that unusual? I asked. For this building, she said, yes. She opened the cabinet slowly. It creaked, the hinge protesting. Inside were 2 shelves, empty except for a faint ring where something round had sat for a long time. A cup, maybe, or a jar. She pressed on the top edge, testing the gap. See, she said, bent. You could fix this with a screwdriver. I don't have one. I do, she said, already reaching into her tote. As she worked, I hovered uselessly, watching the cabinet door shift by millimeters. The gap narrowed, then widened again. It won't seat, she said, frustrated, like the frame's warped. Or the wall, I said. She stopped, looked at me. you mind if I check something?" Before I could answer, she reached up and pressed on the wall above the cabinet. The paint gave slightly. "Not much. Enough." She frowned. "That's odd." A sound came from the hallway then. A door opening. Voices. Martin's voice, low and sharp, and another I didn't recognize. Lena's eyes flicked to me. "Is that your landlord?" "I think so." The voices grew closer. Martin's words blurred into tone, irritation, urgency. The other voice was calm, almost soothing. Lena stepped back from the cabinet. "Okay," she said quietly. "Here's the problem." She took out her phone and showed me the screen. A utility graph. A spike at night, narrow and tall. "This happened twice," she said. "Once last month, once 3 nights ago. High draw, short duration. Bathroom circuit." I thought of the outlet's wet click, the buzzing. "So what?" "So," she said, "someone used a lot of power in this bathroom. And if the cabinet's frame is warped and the walls soft." A knock interrupted her, right on my door, firm, not asking. "Evan," Martin said. His voice was close enough that I could hear the rasp in it. "Open up." Lena's jaw tightened. "He can't know I'm here." "That's not my problem," I whispered, then hated myself for it. The knock came again, harder. Now, I looked around the room, at the blank walls, at the cabinet that wouldn't close, at my phone, still unlocked, the banking alert now overdue. My flaw rose up, familiar and sharp. The certainty that if I just chose fast enough, I could avoid consequences. "Bathroom," I hissed to Lena. "Hide." She slipped inside and closed the door quietly, leaving the cabinet ajar by an inch. I opened the front door. Martin stood there with a man I didn't know, Caleb Price, 41, male, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a reflective vest like a city worker. His eyes scanned past me, already cataloging. "Is there a problem?" I asked. Martin smiled too wide. "We need access," he said. "Now." Behind me in the bathroom, something shifted. A soft scrape, wood against wood. Caleb's gaze sharpened. "What's that noise?" I felt the room tilt, just slightly, like missing a step. And then the hallway lights went out completely, plunging us into a sudden, total dark that made my phone screen flare instinctively to life, illuminating my face, the cabinet door still ajar, and Martin's expression as it finally dropped the smile. The lights came back in stages. First, the hallway emergency strip, thin, sickly yellow. Then the hum of the building, like a chest, refilling with air. My room followed a second later, lamps flickering to life on the far end of the circuit. The sudden brightness made everything feel exposed. Martin blinked, already recalibrating. Caleb didn't. He'd stepped forward during the dark, close enough now that I could smell damp wool and motor oil on his vest. "Power hiccup," Martin said easily. "Happens." Caleb kept his eyes on the bathroom door. "You alone in here?" "Yes," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. Martin shot me a look, not anger exactly. Assessment. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, shoes squeaking on the floor. Caleb followed, filling the doorway behind him like a piece of furniture you can't move without help. "We need to check the breaker," Martin said, already crossing the room. Whole wing flickered. "The breaker's downstairs," I said, "by the laundry." "I know where my breaker is," he said, too fast. The bathroom door shifted behind him. The cabinet creaked. I felt my shoulders crawl toward my ears. "Bathroom circuit tied in here," Martin said. And for a heartbeat, I thought he meant this room that he knew. Then he reached past me and opened the medicine cabinet. Lena had shut it, but not all the way. The door caught on the bent hinge and stopped short, leaving the narrow gap at the top like a slit eye. Martin pressed it with his thumb. It wouldn't seat. "There," he said, satisfied. "That'll do it." "Do what?" I asked. "Draw too much load when it's not aligned," he said. "Trips the line. Old wiring." Caleb leaned in, peering at the cabinet interior. "Looks empty." "It is," I said. "I just moved in." Martin nodded, as if that settled everything. He straightened, then paused. "You smell that?" I inhaled. Lemon cleaner dust. And something else now, hot plastic. Faint, but unmistakable. "The outlet," I said. "Behind the bed, it buzzes." Caleb moved to the bedside table, crouched, and pulled the charger free. The outlet sparked tiny, blue-white, then went dark. "Jesus," he said, "that's not safe." "Take it out of service," Martin said quickly. "I'll get an electrician." "When?" Caleb asked. "Tomorrow." Caleb stood, dusting his hands. He looked from the outlet to the cabinet to my face. "You sure nobody else is in here?" The radiator ticked. The room held its breath. Martin smiled again. He said he's alone. Caleb shrugged. "All right." They left without another word. The door closed softly behind them. Their footsteps faded down the hall, pausing once, listening, then continuing. I locked the door and leaned against it, knees weak. The buzzing in my ears didn't stop when the room went quiet. Lena emerged from the bathroom, jaw tight. "We have a problem," she said. "Several." She pointed at the cabinet. "He knows it's not right. He just doesn't want anyone else knowing." "About what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled the cabinet door open the rest of the way and ran her fingers along the inside edge. "This wasn't bent by accident," she said. "It was forced." "With what?" "Doesn't matter," she said. "What matters is what's behind it." I laughed, a short bark I couldn't stop. "It's a wall." "Not entirely," she said, and pressed again above the cabinet. The paint flexed. This time, a faint crunch followed, like dried plaster giving way. My stomach dropped. We tried the obvious first. I fetched a chair, climbed up, and pushed harder, thinking maybe the cabinet was just poorly installed. The wood groaned. The hinge squealed. Nothing gave. Second attempt. Lena took out her screwdriver and removed the hinge screws entirely. The cabinet door came off in her hands, heavier than it looked. Behind it, the wall wasn't flat. A rectangular seam traced itself through the paint, almost invisible until you knew to look. A panel. My phone buzzed again. No alert this time, just the vibration, like a reminder that time was moving without us. "Okay," I said, "okay, so we open it." "With what?" she asked. "And then what?" "We find out why Daniel filed an emergency ticket." She hesitated. And then we call the police. Now, I asked. And say what? My landlord has a weird cabinet. She closed her eyes. Fine, we document first. She held up her phone, filming the seam, the soft wall. I grabbed mine and turned on the flashlight, angling it so the light grazed the surface. The seam caught, a thin shadow betraying depth. That's when we heard it, a low thump from inside the wall, followed by a scrape. My heart slammed so hard, I tasted metal. What was that? I whispered. We froze, listened. Another sound, longer this time. A drag, like furniture being moved on concrete. Lena swallowed. Okay, she said. Okay, that's. A cough came next, muffled, human. I lunged forward without thinking and pressed my ear to the wall. It was cool, solid. Whatever was on the other side was moving away. It could be pipes, I said, desperate. Old pipes. She shook her head. Pipes don't cough. My phone buzzed again, startling me so badly I dropped it. The flashlight skittered across the floor, throwing shadows that made the room feel like it was breathing. The misdirection came fast and cruel. A shadow slid across the seam, tall and sudden. I screamed. Then the radiator hissed, releasing a plume of steam that crossed the light and vanished. The shadow dissolved. Lena exhaled shakily. Okay, she said. Okay. We worked faster after that, hands clumsy. The third attempt was violent. I fetched the heaviest thing I owned, a hardcover textbook from my bag, and slammed it into the seam. Plaster cracked. Dust puffed into the air, coating my tongue with chalk. Behind the plaster was plywood, thin, screwed in from the other side. Jesus, I said. Another thump, louder now, closer. My arms burned as I pried at the plywood edge with the screwdriver. It slipped, biting into my palm. Warm blood ran down my wrist and spotted the floor. Stop, Lena said. You're hurt. I'm fine, I said, lying. The plywood shifted a fraction, enough to let air through. It smelled wrong, stale, and damp, and unmistakably human. We heard a voice then, weak, male. Please, it said, barely a sound. Don't. Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Martin's voice, sharp now. Open the door. Caleb's joined it, urgent. Now. The footsteps split, one pair running toward the stairs, the other stopping right outside my room. The doorknob rattled. I looked at Lena, at the blood on my hand, at the seam yawning open. We can't leave, I said. She nodded once. Then we finish. The knob twisted again, harder this time. The door frame shuddered. Behind us, the plywood bowed inward. Something or someone pushed back. There was no going back now. The door gave way with a crack that sounded like a rifle shot. The frame split at the latch, cheap wood tearing like wet cardboard. Martin shoved his shoulder through, breath already loud, and Caleb followed him in a heartbeat later, blocking the hallway light with his bulk. Step away, Martin barked, eyes locked on the wall. Both of you. Behind us, the plywood bowed again. A fist punched through, knuckles pale, skin split. The voice came louder this time, raw with panic. Help me, please. Everything collapsed into motion. Caleb lunged for me. I ducked, slipped on dust, and blood and crashed into the dresser. The impact rattled my teeth. Lena was already moving, jamming her shoulder into the plywood seam, widening the gap just enough to get her fingers in. "Police are on their way," she shouted. It was a lie. She hadn't called. None of us had. Phones were dead or forgotten or bleeding battery into uselessness. Martin swore. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know what you did," Lena said and pulled. The plywood tore free with a sound like ripping fabric. Behind it was a cavity, the size of a walk-in closet, framed with studs. No drywall, no insulation, just raw wood and a dangling work light plugged into an extension cord that ran back into the wall, feeding the bathroom circuit. The power spikes, the buzzing outlet, the crooked plate, and inside, slumped against the far stud, was a man. Daniel Price looked smaller than I expected. Hollowed. His hair was matted to his scalp, beard grown wild. One wrist was cuffed to a metal eye bolt sunk into the stud, skin angry and infected around the cuff. His eyes tracked the opening like they were afraid it would close again. Caleb froze. "Jesus," he breathed. Martin didn't. He surged forward, grabbing Lena by the collar and yanking her back. She hit the floor hard, air knocked out of her with a sound like a popped bag. "Don't touch him," Martin yelled. "You'll make it worse." "For who?" I said, and my voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. Caleb turned slowly. "Martin, what is this?" "It's not what you think," Martin said, backing toward the wall, hands up. He broke the lease. He refused to leave. He was damaging the property. "You locked him in a wall," Caleb said. Daniel shook his head weakly. "I paid," he croaked. "I paid. He said there was a problem with the mirror. He said I had to." His voice dissolved into coughing. Wet, deep. The misdirection snapped into focus then, sickeningly clear. The mirrors. Not superstition. Control. A way to make the room easier to watch. No reflections to catch movement. No quick checks to see if someone was behind you. And the cabinet, wood instead of glass, so the panel could be hidden, accessed, adjusted. Caleb took a step back. "Martin," he said, "you need to sit down." Martin's eyes flicked to the door, to the hallway, calculations stripped bare. He lunged, not at me, at Daniel. I moved without thinking. The textbook still in my hand, spine cracked, came down hard on Martin's forearm. Bone met paper and wood with a dull thud. He screamed, high and shocked, and dropped the small black object he'd been holding. A taser skittered across the floor. Caleb swore and tackled Martin from the side. They went down in a tangle of limbs, slamming into the bed frame. The radiator hissed louder, steam venting. The room filled with heat and dust and the coppery smell of blood. Lena crawled to Daniel, hands shaking as she worked at the cuff. "I can't get it," she said. "It's stuck." "I'll pry," I said, and jammed the screwdriver into the eye bolt. My injured palm screamed as I levered it. The wood creaked. The bolt shifted a millimeter. Behind me, something cracked wetly. Martin cried out again, lower this time. Caleb grunted, breath ragged. "Evan," Lena shouted, "hurry." The bolt tore free with a sound like a tooth pulled too hard. Daniel sagged forward, nearly taking Lena with him. She caught him, grunting, and eased him down. Sirens wailed in the distance then. Not close, not saving us, just real. Martin went still under Caleb's weight. Not unconscious. Broken. His arm lay at a wrong angle, eyes glassy with pain and rage. "You ruined everything," he whispered, to no one in particular. I slid down the wall, legs shaking so badly I couldn't trust them. My hand throbbed. Blood soaked my sleeve. Caleb stood, chest heaving. He looked at Daniel, at the wall, at the taser. "I'm calling it in," he said, and finally pulled his phone out. It took forever. Police, EMTs, flashing lights that made the hallway look unreal. Daniel was carried out on a stretcher, oxygen hissing, eyes never leaving the ceiling. Lena rode with him, one hand gripping the rail, the other slick with his sweat. An officer wrapped my hand, asked me to sit, asked me to explain. I did, in pieces. The story sounded impossible, even as I told it. They took Martin away in cuffs, his sweater dark with blood. He didn't look at me. When it was over, when the room was empty and torn apart, and finally, brutally honest, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the blank wall. The cabinet lay in pieces. The panel gaped open, no longer hiding anything. The outlet behind the bed was blackened, melted. I opened my phone camera and looked at my face. Pale, older, a cut blooming on my cheek I didn't remember earning. I didn't recognize myself, not because of what I saw, because of what I hadn't seen coming, even when it was right in front of me. The room didn't belong to me anymore. By the time dawn slid between the buildings and found its way through the window, the police tape was gone, but everything else felt borrowed. The bed was stripped and pushed against the far wall. The radiator was cold. The cabinet lay in splintered pieces in a black contractor bag by the door, along with chunks of plaster and a length of extension cord that smelled faintly burned. An EMT wrapped my hand properly this time, tighter, cleaner. She asked if I felt dizzy. I said no, then admitted maybe. She wrote something down and told me to get it checked again if the pain got worse. She didn't look me in the eye when she said it. They let me leave just after sunrise. I stepped out into the street with my backpack and a plastic bag of things I'd grabbed without thinking: phone charger, toothbrush, the textbook with a cracked spine, and a brownish smear along the edge. The laundromat sign across the street flickered on, same as it had the night before. Buses sighed. Someone walked a dog. Ordinary, relentless. At the hospital, they cleaned the cut on my cheek and took x-rays of my hand. No breaks. "You're lucky," the doctor said, like luck was a coin you either had or didn't. I sat in a vinyl chair with a paper cup of water and watched a TV bolted to the wall play a morning show at low volume. Smiling hosts, traffic updates, a cooking segment about eggs. The disconnect made my head buzz worse than the outlet ever had. Lena found me there an hour later. She looked smaller without her jacket, her hair pulled back in a way that showed the bruise blooming along her jawline. "They're keeping him," she said, dropping into the chair beside me. "Daniel, infection, dehydration, He asked for you. For me? She nodded. He remembers your voice. We didn't go in together. I waited until she came out, eyes red but steady. He's going to make it, she said, physically. And the rest? She shrugged. That's harder. The legal part came next, slow and procedural. Statements, follow-up calls. An officer explained that Martin had owned the building outright, no mortgage, that he'd done his own maintenance, his own renovations, that he'd had complaints over the years, noise, access issues, missing items, but nothing that stuck. No one had thought to look behind a bathroom cabinet. Caleb gave his statement too. He didn't call me after. I didn't blame him. 2 days later, I was back at work, or something like it, answering emails with my bandaged hand, and pretending I hadn't spent a night listening to a man cough inside a wall. My contract manager said, "Take care of yourself." In the same tone, she used to remind me about deadlines. I didn't go back to the building. The city helped me find a short-term place, a sublet above a bakery, expensive and too warm. The bathroom had a mirror the size of a door. The first time I saw myself in it, I flinched. Not because the face was unfamiliar, but because it felt like it was watching me back. At night, I slept with the light on for a while. When I turned it off, I left the bathroom door open so the mirror caught the glow from the street lamp outside. Proof, evidence. Lena called once, then again. Updates, charges filed. Martin's lawyer arguing diminished capacity, property disputes, misunderstandings. She sounded tired, but determined in a way that felt earned. "Did you know," she said on the third call, "that he'd removed mirrors in 3 units over the years? Tenants complained, moved out. No one connected it. Until Daniel, she agreed. I thought about Daniel a lot, about how long it must take for time to blur when you don't have your own reflection to anchor you, about the way a face reminds you you're still there. My private fear, the one about missing obvious things, didn't go away. It just changed shape. Now it showed up when I double-checked outlets before plugging things in, when I paused too long at doorways, when I caught myself using my phone camera instead of a mirror and didn't immediately stop. Weeks passed. The bakery downstairs burned bread every morning at 6. The smell threaded through my dreams. I got used to it. One afternoon, a detective came by with a final form to sign. He asked if I had any questions. "Just one," I said. "The hallway mirror, the big one, was it ever there?" He hesitated. "We didn't find one in storage, so it never existed." He shook his head. "Tenants remembered it, though. Memory is a strange witness." The case wrapped up as cleanly as cases like that ever do. Sentencing pending. Civil suits lined up. News coverage brief, careful with words. Improvised confinement. Landlord abuse. No photos of the wall. On my last night in the city, I packed slowly. When I got to the bathroom, I stopped. I turned the mirror to face the wall. Not permanently, just for a moment, long enough to brush my teeth without looking, long enough to feel the absence again and recognize it for what it was. Control, not magic, not madness alone. Control through omission. I turned it back before leaving. Down on the street, I paused and looked up at the building I'd almost called home. Its windows reflected the sky, pale and ordinary. From the outside, it looked like any other place where people slept and woke and missed things. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You left your charger." For a second, my feet stopped moving. Then another message followed. "Sorry, wrong person." I stood there until the typing dots appeared and vanished again. They didn't come back. I put the phone in my pocket and kept walking, the city swallowing me in its usual way. Ordinary sounds, ordinary light, and just beneath it all, the quiet understanding that sometimes the most dangerous thing in a room is what you're trained not to look for, and how easily you can be convinced that's normal. That's tonight's story. If it gives you chills, make sure to like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next. And if you're still brave enough, there are more dark tales waiting for you right here on the channel. Go watch another if you dare. Welcome back to Mia Horror Stories. Tonight's tale, I woke up to a stranger standing in my room, is best experienced in the dark, which is why the screen will stay black. No distractions, no flashing images, just you, your imagination, and the story. So sit back, relax, and listen all the way to the end, if you dare. The alarm clock blinked for 13 a.m. in cold red digits. It buzzed once, then stopped, swallowed by the silence that had crept back faster than Emma could have imagined. The window was cracked open just a few inches, and a sliver of chill cut through the warmth of the blanket wrapped around her. She blinked against the dark, waiting for her eyes to adjust. That's when she noticed it. A shadow, tall and still, standing near the far wall by the closet. Just there, not moving, her breath hitched in her throat. For a second, she wondered if it was the crooked coat rack or some trick of moonlight. The room smelled faintly of rain, mixed with the sourness of stale coffee from the cup she'd forgotten to dump on the bedside table. "Who's there?" Her voice cracked like dry twigs. The figure didn't move, just stayed there, silent and unmoving. Her heart began to pound, not wildly, but steady and insistent. She tried to convince herself it was a trick, maybe a neighbor's shadow through the curtains, or the back of her laundry basket looking stranger than usual. Her eyes darted around the room, her phone, charging on the desk, lit up with a faint glow. No missed calls or messages. The door was closed. The lock clicked softly. She exhaled slowly and sat up, knees pulling the blanket closer. Maybe the stranger wasn't real. Maybe it was her mind, tired and overworked from the week. But the shadow didn't move. Emma felt a prickling at the base of her neck. And finally, after what seemed like hours, but was probably seconds, she turned on the bedside lamp. The soft yellow light spilled unevenly, cutting through the darkness, and the shape by the closet vanished. There was nothing there. She rubbed her eyes, the kind of slow, tired rub that tries to reset the day's exhaustion. Outside, the faint buzz of a car passed on the wet street. The window rattled a little in its frame. She noticed now the faint scent of something else, burnt toast, maybe, or an old candle melting somewhere downstairs. She reached for her phone and thumbed open the messages. No notifications, no alarms besides the one that had just gone off. Emma slid back under the blanket and rested her forehead against the pillow. It was probably nothing. She had been working late, deadlines squeezing the hours out of her, and the cold draft might have made her half dream. Still, she stared at the wall opposite her bed, every muscle tense, every sound in the quiet house amplified the creak of the pipes, the buzz of the fridge in the kitchen, the faint tap of rain starting to patter against the window again. Her phone buzzed suddenly, startling her. It was a message from her mother. "Did you get home okay? Let me know." She typed back quickly. "Yeah, all good, just tired." Emma closed her eyes again. Sleep wouldn't come easily now. 2 days earlier, Emma had moved into the small apartment in Portland's Alberta Arts District. The kind of place with old hardwood floors that creaked in the night, scuffed walls painted in pale blue, and a kitchen that smelled like a mix of lemon cleaner and the ghost of someone's last burnt dinner. Her job as a freelance graphic designer kept her mostly indoors, glued to a laptop, designing logos and social media campaigns for local businesses. The rent was tight, the neighborhood noisy, but she liked the sense of independence it gave her. She lived alone. It wasn't her first choice. Her friends teased her about the tiny studio, but it was the best she could do on her own. The apartment's only real perk was the street-facing window that caught the morning sun, flooding the space with a golden light that made her coffee taste better. Her name was Emma Morris, 28, female, originally from a small town in Oregon. She had moved to Portland for a fresh start after a rough breakup the year before, a relationship that had left her with a little more caution than confidence. She hated being alone in the dark, but she hated depending on anyone more. Her closest contact was her neighbor, Mark, a guy in his early 30s who worked nights at a nearby bar and sometimes helped her carry groceries up the stairs. He was friendly, but kept his distance, which suited Emma just fine. That night, the uneasy feeling in the room refused to fade. The next morning, the usual sounds of the city filtering through the thin window panes did nothing to soothe her. She pulled on a thick sweater and stepped into the kitchen, where the faint smell of burnt toast lingered like a ghost. Her phone buzzed again. It was a text from Mark. "Hey, I heard a weird noise last night. You okay?" Emma hesitated, then replied, "Yeah, just tired. Thanks for checking." The truth was, she didn't feel okay. The sensation of being watched had settled deep in her chest, a quiet weight she couldn't shake. The shadow from the night before wasn't just a trick of light. It felt like a warning. As she sipped her coffee, she debated calling the landlord about the drafty window or the creaks in the floorboards, but then decided she'd just fix the lock herself. Her phone rang. It was her mother again. "Emma, did you sleep at all?" Her mother's voice sounded concerned. "Not really. Just some weird dreams," Emma said, trying to sound casual. "You're scaring me. Are you sure you're okay?" her mother pressed. "Yeah, Mom, it's nothing." She hung up. But the truth was, Emma had a choice to make. keep living like this, brushing off the strange feeling, or find out what was really lurking in the quiet corners of her new apartment? Emma's phone buzzed again, just as she was locking the front door, the early morning light pale and gray through the cracked window. Mark's message flashed on the screen. "Hey, I saw someone lurking outside your place last night. Creepy. You sure you want to stay there alone?" She paused, keys in hand, feeling the sudden weight of everything she'd been trying to push down since waking to that shadowy figure. The draft from the window whispered cold air around her ankles. Her breath fogged in the chill. She wasn't sure if it was courage or stubbornness that made her type back. "I'm fine, just tired. I'll figure it out." The phone slipped from her fingers onto the hardwood floor, clattering softly. Emma bent to pick it up, then stopped, the hairs on the back of her neck prickling. From the street below came a scraping sound, like someone dragging a heavy object across the wet asphalt. She locked the door and bolted it twice. The next hour was a blur of calls and half-hearted attempts at fixing the lock on her front door. The latch was old, the mechanism stubborn and stiff, and she could feel the cold seeping in through the gaps under the door and window frames. The apartment, which had once felt like a refuge, now felt small and exposed. Emma's phone rang again. This time it was Mark. "Hey, you okay? I can come by, help you with the lock," he said, his voice low and cautious. No, thanks. I can manage," she replied quickly, voice tighter than she wanted. She hated needing help, hated feeling vulnerable. The fear clawing inside her wasn't just about the stranger she'd woken up to. It was about not being able to protect herself. Mark hesitated. "Look, if you want, I can stay over. Just till you feel safer." Emma shook her head, though he couldn't see it. "I don't want to be a burden." "Not a burden. It's just a long night ahead, and you're not the only one who's uneasy." She swallowed and sighed. "Okay, maybe just for a little while." By evening, the rain had turned into a steady drizzle, tapping a constant rhythm on the windows. Emma was packing the small living room, trying to convince herself that locking every door and window was enough. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't let go. She kept glancing at the blinds, half expecting to see eyes peering through the slats. Mark arrived around 8, carrying a toolbox and wearing a worn leather jacket soaked at the shoulders. "Nice place," he said, trying to keep things light as he knelt by the front door. Emma forced a smile. "Thanks. It feels like home when I'm not imagining ghosts." Mark chuckled, but there was something in his eyes that didn't reach the smile. They worked on the lock, Mark patiently explaining the parts he was fixing, while Emma's mind drifted, fixating on every sound. The distant wail of sirens, the uneven hum of the heater, the creak of the old floorboards beneath her feet. "Did you call the landlord?" Mark asked. Emma shook her head. "I'm afraid he won't take it seriously. The place is old. He's got a reputation for ignoring stuff unless it's urgent." "Maybe this is urgent." She didn't answer. She was already regretting agreeing to let Mark stay, but the gnawing unease pushed her to accept any semblance of safety. Around 10, the power flickered once, then cut out entirely. The room plunged into darkness, the rain pounding against the windows louder, echoing in the silence. Emma froze. The flashlight app on her phone barely cut through the blackness. Mark swore under his breath. Looks like the whole block is out. Emma swallowed hard. I hate the dark. Mark nodded. Me too. The two sat close on the worn sofa, the narrow beam from Mark's phone bouncing across the walls, casting long, jittery shadows. Emma's fingers trembled as she texted the power company, but the automated message said the outage was widespread, and they had no estimated time for repairs. Emma's heart thudded. No lights, no working locks, no way to tell if someone was still lurking outside. The rain intensified, turning into a drumming that filled the tiny apartment with a pulsing urgency. Suddenly, a sharp knock sounded at the front door. Emma jumped, the flashlight shaking in her hand. Who's there? Mark called softly. No answer. The knock came again, louder. Emma's breath caught, the phone slipping from her fingers. Mark moved to the door, cautiously peering through the peephole. There's no one there, he said quietly. Emma stepped closer. The knock came again, 3 sharp taps, then silence. The lock on the door suddenly rattled, as if someone was trying to open it. Emma stepped back, heart racing. Mark's voice was low but firm. Stay calm. I'll call the police. Emma grabbed her phone, but it had no signal. She looked up, panic rising. Mark checked his, also dead. We're cut off, he said grimly. The two glanced around the dark apartment, the knock still echoing faintly in their ears. Emma's mind raced. Her fear of being alone had pushed her to accept help, but now they were trapped, powerless and isolated. The stranger wasn't just a shadow anymore. The lock rattled again, sharp and insistent, like a hammer pounding on wood. Emma's knees knocked together despite her efforts to stay still on the sagging sofa. Mark crouched by the door, a flashlight in one hand and a rusty crowbar in the other. A last-minute purchase from the hardware store when the outage first hit. We need to check the windows, Mark whispered, voice low, tight. If someone's messing with the door, they might try another way in. Emma nodded, her heart pounding louder with every breath. The apartment was a narrow rectangle front door and windows on one end, a tiny kitchen tucked against the far wall, and the bedroom beyond that. The bathroom was the only closed-off space, the door creaking slightly as the old hinges strained with the humid air. Mark went first, moving carefully toward the window that faced the street. Emma followed, clutching her phone like a lifeline. The rain had lessened to a light drizzle, but the street was slick, reflecting the dim glow of the few emergency lights still flickering across the neighborhood. Mark lifted the curtain and peered out. Empty. A lone garbage bin tipped over by the curb, the contents soggy and strewn across the pavement. Nothing, he said, a little too quietly. Emma shivered, the chill from the cracked window biting at her skin. Could someone be hiding behind that dumpster? She whispered. Mark shook his head. Not likely. It's a busy street, and this is a main road. Someone lurking there would have been spotted. She nodded, but the sense of being watched didn't ease. Back inside, Mark checked the window lock. It was old and corroded, but still latched tight. "We can't leave this like it is," he muttered. "I'll try to fix the door lock properly. You keep an eye on the windows." Emma stood by the bedroom door, listening. The rain tapped gently on the roof now, a dull, steady drum. The power outage made every sound sharper. A distant siren wailed, footsteps echoed on the street outside. A dog barked in the distance. The apartment felt impossibly small. She moved toward the kitchen counter and grabbed a butter knife, her only weapon. It was ridiculous, but better than nothing. Mark worked on the door lock with a screwdriver from his toolbox. The mechanism groaned and clicked, but the latch wouldn't budge. His fingers slipped, and he cursed softly. "Almost there," he said, sweat beading at his temple despite the cool air. Suddenly, a sharp clatter came from the bedroom. Emma jumped, nearly dropping the knife. Mark spun around, flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Did you hear that?" she asked, voice trembling. Mark nodded slowly. "Stay here." He moved toward the bedroom, the floor creaking beneath his boots. The bedroom was a mess of shadows and half-packed boxes. Emma's suitcase lay open, clothes scattered around it like ghosts. The window was shut tight. Mark's light flicked to the floor, revealing a small silver key lying on the rug. Emma picked it up, confused. "I don't recognize this." Mark examined it. "Could be for the deadbolt on the back door." Emma's stomach dropped. She hadn't told Mark about the back door. It was a narrow service entrance in the kitchen, leading to a fire escape and an alleyway. "Wait," she said, voice tight. "The back door, it's supposed to be locked, but I'm not sure if it actually is. I haven't checked since I moved in." Mark's eyes narrowed. "That could be your weak point." They crept toward the kitchen. The apartment's layout meant the kitchen was a narrow corridor squeezed between the living room and the bathroom, with the back door at the end. The rain had soaked the metal fire escape outside, the droplets making a faint patter on the concrete. Mark tried the deadbolt with the silver key. It turned, but only halfway. The lock was old and sticky. Emma peeked out through the window beside the door. Nothing but wet concrete and shadows. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from below. Someone had slammed a dumpster lid shut. Emma gasped and stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. Mark spun around, raising the flashlight. "False alarm," he said after a tense pause. "Probably the garbage collectors or kids messing around." But the unease lingered. Back by the front door, Mark tried once again to secure the lock, but the mechanism finally gave way with a snap. Emma's breath caught. The door swung open a crack. Mark pushed it shut with a grunt and jammed the crowbar in the gap. "We need to call the police," Emma said, urgency growing in her voice. Mark pulled out his phone, but the screen showed no service. "Still dead," he muttered. Emma's fingers trembled as she tried her own phone again. Nothing. "We're cut off," she said, voice breaking. Hours passed like this, waiting, listening, every small noise making their muscles tighten. Emma's eyes burned, exhaustion creeping in. She rubbed at them, trying to stay alert. Mark moved quietly between rooms, checking locks, barricading doors with furniture. Suddenly, a soft creak came from the bathroom door. Emma froze. Mark pointed the flashlight beam. The door handle rattled. Her heart hammered. "Maybe it's the landlord," she whispered. "He said he might stop by to check on the power." Mark nodded slowly, but didn't move. The handle rattled again. Emma's breath caught. The door swung open, but it was only the old cat from the apartment downstairs, slinking in through a slightly open window. Emma laughed nervously, the tension breaking for a moment. Mark smiled. "See, not all noises are threats." But the reprieve was brief. Suddenly, a loud crash came from outside the back door. Emma's blood ran cold. Mark grabbed her arm. "We need to get out now." Emma hesitated, glancing around their tiny prison. The power was still out, phones useless. The knock at the front door had stopped, but whatever was outside was moving. "This alley leads to the street," Mark said. "If we can get out the back, maybe we can find help." Emma swallowed hard, fear tightening her throat. She knew this was the point of no return. Together, they edged toward the kitchen door. The metal fire escape slick beneath their feet as rain continued to fall steadily. The cold night air bit into Emma's skin as they slipped out, the apartment disappearing behind them. The trap was closing. The rain had finally slowed to drizzle, the wet pavement slick and shiny beneath the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. Emma and Mark stood at the bottom of the fire escape ladder, breath misting in the cold night air. Behind them, the narrow alley stretched out, shadowed and silent, except for the occasional drip of water from the gutters. Emma's heart pounded so loudly she thought the stranger might hear it. Her fingers were raw from gripping the cold metal railing as they climbed down the fire escape, the silver key still tucked inside her jacket pocket. Mark's jaw was tight, eyes darting down the alley, muscles coiled like a sprinter waiting for the gun. "We don't have much time," Mark whispered, voice low and urgent. "If he's still around, he'll come back. We need to get to the main street and find help." Emma nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She'd never felt so exposed, so dangerously close to losing control. Her mind flashed to the shadow in her bedroom, to the rattling lock, to the knocking that had shattered what little peace she'd found. They moved quickly, steps measured but hurried. As they rounded the corner where the alley met the side street, a sudden sound froze them, a scrape against the brick wall, low and deliberate. Mark pushed Emma behind a dumpster, crouching low, eyes scanning the dark. Emma's breath caught as a figure emerged from the shadows, face obscured beneath a soaked hood. He moved with quiet menace, hands shoving into pockets. Mark's grip tightened around a length of pipe he'd grabbed from the alley floor. "Stay behind me." The man stopped, his gaze lingering on the locked fire escape ladder. He muttered something under his breath and pulled out a small crowbar, starting to work on the rusty lock. Emma's blood ran cold. This was no random stranger. He knew the apartment, the exits. The lock groaned but held. The man cursed softly and looked up, eyes narrowing when he spotted Emma and Mark. "Who the hell are you?" Mark demanded, voice steady but edged with anger. The man hesitated, then shifted, revealing a face bruised and worn. "Look, I didn't mean to scare you," he said hurriedly. "I'm I'm Jake. I'm your landlord's cousin. I came to check the place, but the power's out and the locks are busted. Didn't mean no harm. Emma's tension wavered, but didn't break. Why didn't you call? Why didn't you identify yourself? Jake shrugged, looking embarrassed. Phone down for me too. I heard noises last night, thought I'd check it out. Sorry if I scared you. Mark lowered the pipe, but didn't relax. You could have just knocked. Before Jake could answer, a sharp shout echoed from the street behind them. Hey, what's going on there? A patrol car rolled up, headlights cutting through the mist. The officers jumped out, hands on their belts. Mark stepped forward quickly, explaining the situation, while Emma clung to the pipe she'd found near the fire escape. The officers checked Jake's ID, confirmed he was the landlord's relative, and advised the group to stay together until the power came back on. Emma exhaled slowly, relief mingling with exhaustion. Her knees buckled slightly, and Mark caught her just in time. You okay? He asked, voice soft. I will be, she said, though her voice was shaky. The patrol car's radio crackled to life, announcing the restoration of power in the neighborhood in the next 30 minutes. Emma and Mark watched the streetlights flicker back on, the hum of electricity creeping through the wires. But as the warmth returned, Emma felt a lingering chill, the raw edge of fear etched into her bones. The night had passed. The immediate danger was gone, but the quiet she'd once craved had been shattered forever. Emma sat on the cracked leather sofa in the living room, wrapped in a threadbare blanket that smelled faintly of Mark's jacket. The morning light filtered through the windows, still a little gray and overcast, but the power was back on. The hum of the refrigerator and the low murmur of distant traffic filled the apartment, sounds that should have been comforting, but felt foreign, almost intrusive after the night's silence. Her phone buzzed insistently on the coffee table, but she let it lie there, untouched. Mark was already at work, leaving early to avoid questions about why he'd spent the night. They had shared a quiet breakfast, eaten in silence, the tension too heavy for casual conversation. Emma had thanked him softly before he left, watching him disappear down the stairs with a wary smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The apartment felt smaller now. The walls, the cracked window, even the rusty locks on the doors, they all seemed like thin barriers, barely holding something back. The landlord had finally called, promising urgent repairs, and that someone would come by that afternoon to change all the locks. But Emma wasn't sure locks were enough. Not anymore. She found herself packing the narrow hallway to the kitchen, eyes darting to the deadbolt that had stubbornly refused to turn. The silver key she had found lay on the counter, a small metal reminder of the vulnerability she'd always suspected but never confronted. Her mother called again, concern threading through her voice as they talked. Emma downplayed everything, but inside she felt fractured. She hadn't slept more than a few restless hours since the night, waking to every creak and sigh of the old building. The fear was no longer a shadow in the dark. It was a living thing, coiled inside her chest. Later, she met with the police officers who had come back to follow up. They took a report, assured her the area had been checked, and no suspicious persons remained. Jake, the landlord's cousin, had apparently been arrested earlier for unrelated assault charges, something Emma hadn't known about. That bruised face hadn't been innocent after all. The revelation sent a fresh wave of cold through Emma. How had she missed that? How had she trusted? She thanked the officers quietly, eyes fixed on the floor, her voice barely above a whisper. Days passed in a blur of phone calls, locksmith visits, and strained conversations with neighbors. Mark stayed nearby, but gave her space, respecting the silent boundary Emma had drawn. Their friendship felt altered, touched by something raw and unspoken. Emma found herself sleeping with the curtains drawn tight, the window latched with a temporary bar, and a small kitchen knife by her bedside. The apartment was still her sanctuary, but a fragile one. At night, the quiet creaks and sighs no longer just reminded her of the building's age. They sounded like warnings, whispers of a presence she could never quite name. She didn't tell anyone about the occasional feeling that someone was still watching from just outside the window, or the unexplained faint scent of burnt toast that sometimes drifted through the apartment, even though she never cooked it. One evening, as she prepared a simple dinner, the power flickered again briefly, but the lights stayed on. Emma paused, knife in hand, eyes flicking to the window. Nothing was there, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone had never truly left. And that's the end of today's chilling tale. If you enjoyed this story and want more nights full of suspense, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss a scare. I've got plenty more stories waiting for you, so stick around and check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you.